Lord, take our minds and think with them. Take our mouths and speak with them. Take our hearts and set them on fire with your love. Amen. Please be seated. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to be with you this morning. My name is Michael Drinkwater. I am the newly called rector of St. John's Episcopal Church in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And this is my last Sunday doing supply before I join them next week, and it is a pleasure to be spending it with you here at St. Thomas. So, this morning I want to talk about being real. Have you ever heard someone say, I'm going to be real with you for just a second? Or has anyone ever asked you, just be real with me, just shoot straight? Yeah. Okay. I've used the phrase many times in my life, especially when I was frustrated with superficial relationships or easy answers given at the drop of a hat. Ideally, our relationships begin on the surface. I can remember meeting my best friend in the second grade, and a lifelong friendship was born from who I decided to eat lunch with that day. I can remember the first time I met my wife in the parking lot of Saggio's in front of the university, exchanged superficial pleasantries, and I'm sure each of you can remember similar stories of close friends where the meeting was, just normal, where you said, hello, how are you? Though, admittedly, we don't hear about them much in Scripture. We can safely assume that the first time the disciples met Jesus, there was some fairly superficial decision-making. I like what this man has to say. I'll follow him and make sure he's the real thing. I saw this man heal someone. I'm going to follow him and make sure that this is real. But by the time we make it to Holy Week, there is no question in anyone's mind whether or not Jesus is real. The way he deals with his own authority, his ability to forgive even from the cross, his caring for his mother even in the midst of his own death, Jesus was a real kind of person. What's more, when we meet the resurrected Christ, it seems like we've never met anyone so real. I had a New Testament professor one time that turned my thinking around about this story by saying that Jesus was able to get into the upper room with the disciples, not because he was a ghost, but because Jesus was made out of the stuff of the resurrection, and thus was so real that nothing as superficial as a door could keep him out. In other words, Jesus was more real than any kind of walls the disciples could have put up to keep him out in their fear. So that's what I want you to take away from today. The resurrection is an invitation to the real, in every possible sense of the word. The resurrection did not undo the actions that we read about last week. Jesus was still put on trial. Jesus was still sentenced to death. Jesus was still tortured and then ultimately killed by the powers of his time. And the resurrection doesn't gloss over that fact. In fact, today we hear the story again. Jesus says, put your fingers in my hands and put your hand in my side. A painful memory of the events of last week. But the resurrection proved once and for all that what Jesus had preached during his life could not be made null and void by the power of death. Because while death is still real, our hope of the resurrection is more so. Many congregations this morning will hear a story about doubting Thomas, a sermon about doubting Thomas, but not you, because I don't think Thomas did anything to deserve such an epithet this morning. His poking and prodding sense of reality is exactly what we needed this morning. after suffering with Jesus through the events of last week. Because while those who believe without seeing receive a personal commendation in this gospel text, those of us who are skeptics, who long for the real, we don't go away from this gospel disappointed.